while we're trying to speak to somebody else, who's Don Flynn. Don is on the steering committee of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal, and he's been very influential. Hello, Don. He's written a few books on the question of migration, immigration, and is somewhat of something of an expert on the Nationalities and Borders Bill. Now, there's two aspects to the bill, aren't they? As Daniel mentioned, it makes the situation of refugees, asylum seekers, a lot worse. It takes out the possibility. I think it makes it much harder to appeal, etc. And there's another aspect to it, which we're also going to discuss later with Jackie Walker. This is the threat of taking away somebody's citizenship without even notifying them. So I hope you can shed some light on both these issues for us. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, thanks, Tina, and good morning, everyone. Yes, the headline issues are the impact that it's going to be having on asylum routes into the UK. It's effectively going to create a two-tier system in which the only people who will be acknowledged for refugee protection are people who have come from the official resettlement routes, which basically involves a long drawn-out procedure. It normally means that people who have been living in refugee camps outside the UK and very close to the zones of conflict in most cases, who after a long period of time have been pre-selected by the UN refugee, and they are then accepted by the UK and they're admitted into the country. Anybody who comes in outside of that procedure is going to be regarded as people who arrive spontaneously on their own initiative at the border and ask for asylum once they arrive here is going to be regarded as inadmissible. Their application is going to be regarded as inadmissible. And of course, the biggest group that we've come to learn about this in recent times have been people who are arriving on the small boats crossing the channel. And I think this is what has given the turbocharged the Home Office's appeal to the British people to understand the so-called refugee crisis as being entirely in terms of people who have been coming into the country on this basis. And what the government intends here is that they will be refused admission into the asylum procedures, and instead the Home Office will look to remove them to a so-called safe country. Now they're going to have huge difficulties in doing this, because that will require a resettlement agreement with a safe country. And at the moment, there are no countries which have agreed to do this. We've had talk of Rwanda as being a possible candidate, and also Albania. But it's no sooner that these countries are mentioned as possibilities than you get Rwandan and Albanian government officials denying that they're having anything to do with it. So the main effect of this is it's going to be putting a lot of people, or people who are arriving on the small boat route, into limbo, where they're going to be hanging around for 6 months, inadequately supported by anyone, until such time as the 6 month time limit is reached. And then the government has agreed that it is going to be assessing them for refugee status. And, you know, we have to, one of the important things to bear in mind here is that merely you come here under these routes does not mean that you are not a refugee. Even the Home Office admits, Priti Patel said in a statement to a Home Office committee, that 30% of the people arrive, even by her very minimalistic standards, that 30% of the people arriving by the small boat route are eligible for refugee status. Whereas in fact, the reality is, in accordance with a successful appeal statistics, it's well over 50% of people arriving by virtually any route ought to be regarded as refugees. So people will enter the appeal system, and the bill intends that there's going to be serious modifications to the appeal system. Some appeals will be one chance only. If your appeal is not successful, you won't have an opportunity to proceed to any further stages. Whole species of evidence that refugees might want to offer to support their own cases are going to be regarded as inadmissible, as mandatory. Judges will be instructed not to take into account the evidence that the that the refugees are offering on their behalf. And then even after all of this is, and also the inadequacy of legal support for people going through the refugee procedure, that's going to continue. It's very, very difficult, particularly with the short notice time scale that we're given, for people to be able to have adequate legal representation at these appeals. Now, assuming that you are successful in going through these routes, and I personally suspect that even then, a lot of people will be successful simply because they clearly are refugees. Now, what they are going to be getting is not full refugee status. If they come via the so-called illegal routes, they will only be given a provisional and temporary refugee status, which will continue for many years. And during the course of that, they will not be allowed the same rights to family reunification, which exist for other refugees. And there are also going to be issues as far as the financial support that they're offered. So that's that route. You've mentioned, and I'll deal with this briefly, I've been talking for a long time, but the question of the deprivation of citizenship. This is a power that the government has had for, the Home Secretary has had for a long time. And in fact, its roots go back to the Labour government when Jack Straw introduced this as one of Labour's nationality bills, where it became possible for the Secretary of State to take the decision that a person constituted a threat to normal civil order, and therefore they could deprive them of citizenship. The one thing to be said about that is that there were safeguards built into it. People couldn't be deprived of citizenship if it would render them stateless. They had no other citizenship to depend upon, and there were appeal procedures built into it. Now, this government is obviously regards this as being an impediment to what they want to do, which is basically hugely extend the discretion of the Home Secretary to be able to rule out just about everybody, no longer the very high bar of somebody who constitutes a threat to civil order, but basically anybody who is regarded as frankly a pain in the arse, which could include people who of ordinary people have been convicted of a criminal offence, and right the way through to people who have been caught up in a sort of situation which I suppose is typified by the famous Shamima Begin case. Now, in some circumstances, the government is going to be able to, in circumstances where they claim they have not been able to contact the person concerned, they are going to be able to deprive them of citizenship without notifying them. And this is offensive on a whole number of levels. The relationship between the citizen and the state is supposed to be one of the sacrosanct mysteries of the British Constitution, that a population consists of not only good, hard-working people who pay their taxes and so on, but it also consists of villains and ne'er-do-wells and whatever. But when it comes to the rule of law, it doesn't matter. They are all citizens and they all have rights, and the state has to respect that. Now,
Don, what does that mean if you take away somebody's citizenship? Are they deported then? What does it lead to?
Well, in yes, they can be deported. A British citizen cannot be deported at the moment. So if a person is deprived of British citizenship, then they can be deported. Probably the majority of people who are going to be affected by this are people who are outside the UK. Their convictions or the charges laid against them are in a foreign jurisdiction. And therefore the effect of it will be that they will be deprived of any consular support, and they will not be able to rely on any assistance that the state would give them. My final point, and I'm aware of the time, is that this is going to affect a group of people. We estimate something in the region of 6 million people who are theoretically have access to another citizenship. Doesn't include people like me, born in the UK. Both my parents born in the UK. I can't be deprived of citizenship even if I do the most heinous and horrible thing, at least not at the moment.
Don't do it.
On that. But people whose parents were born outside the United Kingdom, and when there is a theoretical argument that the individual concerned will be able to access the citizenship of their parents, as with the Shamima Begin case, they can be deprived of British citizenship. because the government can say you can avail yourself of the citizenship of Bangladesh, Pakistan, whatever country they're talking about. So the charge of racism goes right to the heart of this measure as well.
Yeah.